So moving into our outward swinging doors, one of the biggest things we want to talk about is what we're sizing up when we're looking at outward swinging doors. Upon approaching our door, some of the things that we want to look at are things like, where's our doorknob located? Where's our hinges located? Obviously, with outward swinging doors, we're going to be able to see where our hinges are, but we want to get some kind of idea of if they're located on the left side or the right side. Most of the times, our left-sided door hinges are going to be the most challenging ones to cut if we need to cut them, because of the way our saws are set up. Most of our saws are all set up for inboard cutting, which means our board is on the inside of the arm of the saw. So a lot of times, pressing the saw up against the door is going to make it hard to cut those left side hinges. So just knowing little things like that are all things that we want to consider. Being able to look at where our locks are and how many different types of locks are important, because those are things that we're going to have to deal with when we approach these commercial side doors, these commercial structures. Looking at a lot of the way these doors are set up in Montgomery County, most of our challenging doors that we find on commercial structures are usually on our Bravo, our Charlies, and our Delta sides, especially down in like Silver Spring where Sam works at.
Yeah, so downtown Silver Spring, Old Town Kensington, Old Town Gaithersburg, some of your outlying areas that have older neighborhoods or older businesses in them. You're talking about like 1-story and 2-story commercial strips. Talking about anything from a jewelry store to a sub shop. And all of those places want to do everything possible to keep people out. Commercial burglary is a thing in Montgomery County for sure. And these business owners go through great lengths to try to keep people out. When you're sizing up the door on the the Bravo, Charlie, Delta side, the ends or the rear of those commercial buildings, or even your ground floor of your apartment buildings, and you see a series of carriage bolts on that outward swinging door, you've got some you got some work to do. What's behind those? What are those carriage bolts indicating? So if you're seeing a 2 top, 2 bottom, it's obviously holding a bracket in, so you're probably dealing with a drop bar situation. What's that drop bar made of? Did they just put a 2x4 in there, or they put something heavier in there? Do they have something that's commercially available that you can attach to the door that's metal? You just don't know. You're going to have, they're going to heavy up with locks. They're going to heavy up with, everything and anything possible to keep somebody from getting into that place and taking their stuff. And certainly with apartment buildings these days, keeping folks out, because people like that reassurance of safety and security once they're in the apartment building, right? So size up's important. And at 2 a.m. with no lighting, you really have to be on your feet. And again, what always helps you is you've been to these places before. You've been there maybe hundreds of times on EMS runs, fire alarms, gas leaks, that kind of stuff. Now you get there and it's the big one. Well, if you've been paying attention to these features on these doors, you know what you're going to have to lead off with to defeat the features of the door and get in and begin your work.
So along with being able to identify these locks from the outside, we also want to take into consideration that some of these locks also don't present themselves from the outside. Some of these locks, the way they're fastened to the door is the screws or bolts are just zipped into the door where they don't actually come through on the other side, which makes it hard for us to identify, and we wouldn't be able to identify until we get our tools in the door and actually start the actual forcible entry process. So take into consideration when you're actually moving your tools that if the door starts to bend, where is it not bending? Because where it's not bending, that's where there's going to be another lock. So these are all things that we want to consider. When we look at these locks on the back side of the door, we're faced with many different styles and many different kinds of locks. So like Captain Villiani was just saying, we have our drop bar brackets, we have our drop bar mounts, but some of these locks that are heavy duty locks that we find on commercial structures, again, they don't present themselves on the back side. So this lock here is a heavy duty slide bolt, all right, which slides from the door into the frame. We wouldn't see that on the other side until we got our bar in and actually saw the bar coming across our face in the door in the frame. Different types of hasps and padlocks, chain locks, hotel locks, and not to forget our rim locks. So we have 2 different style rim locks, our vertical deadbolts, and our night latches. All of these different features that people put on commercial occupancies to keep other people outside of their business. Again, these types of locks will present themselves sometimes they don't.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about here, or what we're going to demonstrate, is forcing an outward swinging door. So you're think about your commercial occupancies, the outsides of your apartment buildings, that kind of stuff. In sizing this door up, being this is a prop, we obviously know where we're going to have to force closest to that lock. So you'll see RJ, he's going to go adds first on this, and he's going to set his adds in as close to the lock as he can get it. Okay. And you'll notice we're doing a 1-person method today. Obviously, if you have 2 people, you don't have limited staffing, the second person's going to have the axe for you and be able to capture some of your progress if you need it, and also obviously do your striking. But for the purposes of this training, you're going to see a 1-person approach, so I can actually talk it along. So I'm sure you heard that striking. You heard some tink, 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 and then all of a sudden a tonk. So it went tink, 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 tonk. That tonk is that deadening sound of metal on metal. That's how you know that you've gotten to the jam of the frame and that you're in the right place, okay? You're in the right place for your next move at least. So as you'll see, RJ is going to gap the door outward and angle his adds so it can get past that jam. And notice he's getting as much of the adds into the door as possible, okay? You want to increase your mechanical advantage and get it as close to the pivot where the adds meets the shaft of the Halligan bar for you to force, okay? Very easily forced outwards, and notice he immediately controlled the door. We don't know what's behind that door. We forced the door. You could obviously have smoke and fire. You could have a dog. You could have an armed person ready to greet you. So you want to be able to immediately control that door, okay? You don't want to just force it wide open. Also think about controlling the vent, right? We're talking about flow path. So once we force these doors, we want to be able to control them in case the nozzle team isn't ready to make the push. We don't want to create a flow path prematurely before they go in and extinguish the fire, before we go in and start performing a search. Okay, so we want to take all that stuff into consideration. I'm going to show you a 1-person forcible entry trick using a wedge. Think about this as a scenario. You're the engine officer, middle of the night, the truck's delayed getting in, you're in downtown Silver Spring, far out somewhere in the county where your special service is delayed. So you got to get this door open. Your nozzle team's making the stretch, they're getting their line right. You've got to get this door forced open. So using a wedge in the forks of your Halligan bar, it allows your Halligan bar to come off the door enough so that when you start the force, your adz is going to bend around and get around the jam without you having to reposition and re-gap. And you'll see this right now. So what that wedge did was it kept the Halligan bar at an angle of approach that allowed the adz of the bar to come around the jam without you having to get to the jam. That tink, tink, tonk, you're going to be able to avoid that. You won't have to wait for that metal, that deadening sound of metal on metal to gap and then continue your force, okay? So just a little trick again. perfect scenario for an engine officer that you really need to get in this occupancy quickly to effect the force and effect a knockdown of the fire, search.